Welcome to Voices of Privacy. In a recent webisode, we talked about smart devices and how they collect all kinds of information about you and what you do. We talked about smart watches, smartphones, even smart home speakers. But what about your car? How much information are you willing to share with it?
To know more about this topic, we had the opportunity to interview two professors who did a study on smart cars, Drs. Oliver Zag and Dr. Rajiv Kohli. So welcome. So we're all curious. We all have smart cars or may have them in the future. What is it and why are these smart cars collecting so much information, and what kind of information are they collecting?
Yeah, so smart cars are really computers on four wheels, right? And they collect all sorts of data. And you might even ask, what's the kind of data they're not collecting? They're collecting any data about the car itself, the way you drive it, and also data about you, ranging from the route you're traveling to the acceleration and braking data, to even the position of your seat and the radio station you're listening to. So that's really the connected car in short. And why do they need to collect that data? That might be a really important question. And there are really good reasons for collecting this data. Much of the data is simply needed for the functioning of the car. So if you want to have driver assistance systems, assisted parking, for instance, then you need to have data about the parking space, the environment, and so forth. If you want to offer remote maintenance services, you need to know something about the condition of your vehicle, no doubt about this. But there are also, let's say, the less comfortable usages of this data. So car companies need this data also to improve their bargaining position. They want to use this data then to trade this with insurances, for instance, with repair services, so that when you go to maintain your car, the service garage might need to pay a fee to be able to access your driving data. When you have a warranty claim, maybe the car company will look into your driving record and say, well, the warranty claim might be not justified.
Actually, Oliver, this brings the question I have, because there was a Washington Post article I think you referred to, and it was like 2020, and it says, can my smart car track my teams? Can my insurance company have information about my driving that's going to have an impact? Things like that. Is that possible?
Yeah, I think with many connected cars, it's possible. So current connected cars have around about 200 plus sensors on board. Many have video cameras. A typical Tesla connected car has in the area of 8 different cameras, both mirror or capturing the outside of the car and inside the car. There were even sort of newspaper reports, right, about employees of Tesla basically watching car video recordings of people in the car, but also of the interiors of garage, right, where the cars were parked. So there's extensive data, video data, but all sorts of data really that is captured and that can be used for different purposes. There was also a case in Berlin, for instance, where a car manufacturer was asked by police authorities to share data in order to find who was responsible for a traffic accident. So this data is being shared for a number of different reasons and is used for different purposes. And we as users, we're sometimes not aware, right, of the different possible usages of this data. And we've got very limited ability these days to control what happens with our data. And that's really where much of the worry and concern comes from.
I want to add to the answer that Oliver had to your question, Franz. Can they share this data? The short answer is yes. They can share it with insurance companies. They can share with law enforcement. There was a case where somebody had keyed the side of a car, and turns out the Tesla was recording all of that. So in this case, they were able to track down a criminal, as Oliver also mentioned the case in Berlin. The question is, who owns the data? And in the past, courts have ruled that the data belongs to both parties. So if you have signed off on the dotted line that says my connected car manufacturer should have access to my data. I give my data to them to improve services, as Oliver mentioned, to come up with safety services, to come up with customized services. That also means that the company owns the data. And in short, it's up to the company whether they want to share that data with others or not.
That's fascinating because I think most consumers are signing on the dotted line thinking, I'm purchasing this car, I'm agreeing to warranties. There's no possible thought potentially in their mind that this is also releasing all of their data and where this could go in the future. So what were your main findings within your study and how we can really advise consumers moving forward, especially with the aspect of that both parties own the data? What does that mean now? Where are the lines drawn?
Yeah, exactly. I think first we had a deep dive into the privacy concerns of actual car drivers. So what are they really concerned about, given the vast capabilities of these connected cars to record, process, and share driving data? And what we found is that 41% of those people whom we interacted with, and these were people in Germany who are known to be sort of slightly more privacy sensitive maybe than some of the others, felt that they had a concern with their use of the data. And that really ranged from moderate concerns, feelings of discomfort, to really fundamental fears. And fundamental fears of the nature, I can be surveilled, people can track my behavior, the information might be used against me by prosecution agencies, it might be used against me if I'm presenting warranty claims of that nature, to really, how can I control my data? In the end, it's my data. And that's maybe the second really important finding next to this idea of we are concerned with our use of data and the lack of control, that we actually feel as users that it's our driving data. It's our car, we bought it, we're driving it, so it's our driving data, yet it's not in our control. And that creates massive discomfort. That's really what we found, at least for 41% of those who participated.
We also found that even when the data are not privacy related, drivers are reluctant to share the data because of this idea of psychological ownership, that this data belongs to me and I should be compensated if you're going to use this data. For example, wiper data, that's not very privacy related, but consumers and drivers were reluctant to even share that because they felt it belonged to them.
Given the laws in Europe, that everybody says, European laws protect a lot more privacy. And yet your study was over there and people were still worried. So can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
So we did 3 studies with participants in Germany, a qualitative interview study with 120 people whom we interviewed with short interviews, being drivers. Then we had a survey, around about 300 people who participated in a survey. And then we did a field experiment, which was actually quite a cool thing. So we recruited people with their cars, and then we turned their cars with sort of a plug-in device into connected cars. And then we sort of examined their data sharing behavior in a field setting. That was the 3 studies. And now this puzzle basically, right? That individuals have feelings of ownership, and that in Germany and Europe in general, we have strong data protection legislation, and GDPR regulation, or GDPR, has been some sort of role model also for other countries, right? And Europe, to some extent, is seen as at the forefront of privacy protection. The driving data that we're talking about is not just personal data in the sense of the GDPR, but it's also misused by many car manufacturers. So the GDPR essentially gives users the right to access the data, to ask the data to be deleted if they want, and gives them the right also to trade this data, right? To migrate it from one player to the other. Yet in many cases, this is difficult at best, right, for the actual drivers. So also from a regulatory point of view, it's really challenging, to say the least, right, the current practices.
Does either one of you have a smart car?
Right, I do. It's connected car, I would say, not the Teslas, but highly connected car. In fact, that's what got me interested in this project, working with Oliver and Patrick. When we first started talking about this paper, we were thinking about the privacy calculus, whether drivers will share or not share. They do this calculus where they say, are the benefits greater than the costs or the loss of privacy? We very quickly came to the conclusion, especially after I bought my connected car, was that really the drivers have no choice anymore. When you're going to buy a connected car, you're not going to be able to turn off all these features. Some cases you don't want to turn off because they are also safety related. Others you cannot turn off because you don't know what the car is sending. So the more relevant question for us at that point was, what would you as a driver share, with whom, under what conditions, for how long, what kind of data? And that's what drove this research. And we found some very interesting things, including some things that didn't make it in the paper. One of which was that people are willing to share their data for a very small compensation.
That's fascinating, because we talk about this all the time, and looking at the profiling of different consumers and the value of their data. So, and we look at that and we look at it from the US perspective. If consumers were given, there's this company down in Texas that we always talk about, and they sell coffee, and you don't have to pay for the coffee. You have to give them your data, and that is worth it. That exchange is worth it. So right there, in terms of consumers actually having an understanding of, my data has value and I could get compensated for it, which is an entirely other discussion, but it's fascinating that that was tapped into and that was part of your findings.
And Donna, this connects really well with the psychological ownership aspect. So because the consumers and drivers feel it's their data, even for a small compensation, they are sharing it themselves. The company is not just taking it from them without their knowledge. So a cup of coffee might be enough. What we found fascinating was that it doesn't even have to be a monetary compensation or a cup of coffee. If we were to tell the drivers, what if your data were to be used for a program called Lifesaver, which will save lives in the future? It triggered this altruistic belief and feeling in them. And they said, oh, you want my data? It'll help save lives? Yes, you can have it.
Wow. That is extraordinary. And it gives me hope again for the humanity and kindness of people, because that is a good aspect, right? From the psychological, I am doing something good with it. It's not just being used for propaganda or anything along those lines.
So Rajiv, do you have 2 or 3 tips for people who are considering smart cars, and what they should do to protect their information, or things they might want to consider?
So right now, I would say, with the caveat that there is not a whole lot of awareness among the drivers or car owners of what the car is actually collecting. Over time, I think this will become more clear and more codified, where companies will have to disclose what they are collecting. But in terms of how they can protect themselves, they have to decide what data that they want to protect. For example, Oliver mentioned driving data. That comes over time. And there is very little a driver can do except for shutting off those features, which no driver would want to do, especially after they've spent all this money buying an important car or expensive car and car that's collecting all this data and helping them be safe. The other thing is demand from the company or your service provider. What are they collecting? And do they have permission to collect? And ask them, what are they going to be doing with that data? So one way I protected myself before I had the connected car was State Farm had sent me this little drive, and they said, we'll give you a discount if you plug this into your car. I looked at the discount. It's not worth the cost of giving up my privacy. So I didn't. I sent it back to them and I didn't use it. So this is one way consumers can do that. But outside of that, what the car is collecting, we don't even know what it's collecting, and we don't know what the company is doing with that data.
That's fantastic information, because this is what we're about. Voices of Privacy is about educating everybody, and we're always telling people, go learn about this. And as we're collecting all these devices, including smart cars, we have to educate ourselves about what it means.
And France, I always quote you and your study from many years ago that you presented at VCU, where you talked about how consumers cannot keep up with all the changes that happen, all the upgrades that happen to your devices, your operating system, and it resets all the settings, privacy settings. So finally, what happens is consumers just give up. They say, all right, I cannot keep up with that. You can have whatever you want.
So Rajiv and Oliver, thank you so much. This is so informative. I know everybody's going to be really listening to this and paying attention. And we really, really appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you both so much. This is just going to uncover so much more for our audience and consumers, and hopefully they will continue to stay tuned for more updates. But smart cars, and we're just scratching the surface.